Have you ever wondered what exists beyond death? What if I told you that there is a hidden secret, something that has been hidden from humanity for millennia? And worse, that this secret has a direct relationship with who Jesus really is, far beyond what we have been told? In today's video, you will hear the shocking story of a surgeon who died for 23 minutes, was declared clinically dead, and came back with a revelation that simply challenges everything we believe about life, death, science, and spirituality. What he saw was something that was hidden from humanity. So leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell, because this story is simply one of the most impactful near-death experiences of all time. And comment below which city you are watching this video from, so I know how far this powerful message is reaching. Get ready, because what you are about to hear now could change your life forever. My name is Dr. Gregory Hamilton. I am 52 years old. I live in Chicago, and I have devoted my entire life to medicine. If you had asked me until recently if I believed in God, my answer would have been simple and direct. No. To me, God was just a creation of the human mind to alleviate the fear of the unknown. Soul, life after death, that to me was nothing more than cheap mythology. I always saw consciousness as a consequence of electrical discharges in the brain. When the brain shuts down, it's all over. Game over. I have spent 26 years in the largest cardiovascular operating rooms in the United States. I have held hearts in my hands. I have stopped and restarted the organ that moves life. And never, not once, have I seen a sign of anything that could be called a soul. I clearly remember the times when patients, after being resuscitated, would look at me in fear and say things like, "Doctor, I saw a light. I floated outside my body. Someone told me it wasn't my time." You know what? I did. I smiled politely, wrote it down on the chart, and moved on. In my head, everything explained itself. Cerebral hypoxia, delirium, dopamine discharge. There was no mystery. I was that guy who mentally mocked religious people, who laughed at spiritualists, who thought that everything came down to chemistry, biology, and physics. And that's exactly why the universe chose me. Because life has a cruel way and I need to break the certainties of the arrogant. What I didn't know is that in just a few minutes my own heart, the one I thought I understood so well, would betray me. And more than that, it would drag me into a reality I could never imagine. I was about to die, and discovering a secret that has been hidden from humanity for millennia. It was an ordinary morning. I was in the operating room at Northwestern Hospital in Chicago. The team was waiting for me. The patient was a 48-year-old man with a severe coronary artery blockage. Another bypass surgery, something I've done hundreds of times. I was in control. Total precision. Every movement of the scalpel was an extension of my thinking. I always said that on the operating table, I was God. I decided who lived and who died. Death to me was just a biological flaw that technology could correct. Until something went off script. I felt a tightness in my chest, a sharp, crushing pain that radiated down my left arm and into my jaw. At first I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was muscle tension, I thought, but no. The tightness turned to fire inside my chest. My vision began to blur. The nurses' voices became distant, as if I were underwater. The scalpel fell from my hand, making a metallic sound on the floor. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't respond. "Doctor, is everything okay?" I heard someone ask. I couldn't answer. My legs felt weak. My eyes rolled back, and I fell. I heard everything, but my body didn't obey me anymore. "Dr. Hamilton is having a heart attack. Help, get the defibrillator. Compression, now. Pulse absent. Straight line, come on, come on!" I heard the voices, the sound of footsteps, the alarms, but suddenly, everything went silent. My last thought was cold, clinical, automatic. Cardiac arrest. That's how it ends. And then it was over, at least for my physical body. Because for my consciousness, that's exactly where it all started. I felt light, very light. The pain was gone. The fire in my chest disappeared as if it had never been there. I noticed something absurd. I was floating above the room. I saw my own body, lying on the floor, surrounded by the desperate staff. I saw everything in crystal clear detail. The sweat on the nurse's face, the tears streaming down the resident doctor's face, the clock's hands, which seemed to be slowing down. And the strangest thing, I heard their thoughts. He's not coming back, my God, he's dead. 7 shocks, nothing. 7 attempts to bring me back, 7. But I wasn't there anymore. Suddenly something changed. The walls of the room began to disappear, dissolving like smoke. The sound grew distant. Everything went white, intense, pulsating. And in that instant, I realized something that made my spirit freeze with fear and fascination at the same time. I was dead, but more alive than ever. What was about to happen would destroy everything I believed about life, death, reality, and about Jesus. The white that surrounded me was not just light, it was a presence, a living, pulsating consciousness that seemed to breathe, vibrate, as if he were watching me. The sound of the physical world, the shocks, the voices, the alarms, faded away until it was a distant whisper, and then absolute silence. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was a full silence, full of something I couldn't understand. Suddenly, a wave of heat ran through my being. It wasn't fire. It wasn't discomfort. It was a hug made of light. Gregory. My name echoed from every direction, but it was no ordinary voice. It didn't enter the ears. It vibrated inside me, as if every atom of my existence recognized that sound. I felt, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was in front of something infinitely greater than anything I knew, and at the same time, strangely familiar. It was then that I noticed a presence forming in the midst of the light. At first an indistinct silhouette, as if the light itself was condensing, taking shape, and even before its contours became clear, my entire being already knew who he was. Jesus. Not the Jesus of the paintings, not the one in the churches, the statues, the engravings, not the Jesus I mentally mocked when I heard devotees speak of him. No, it was something much, much bigger. He didn't look like a religious figure, nor did he look like a person in the human sense of the word. He was a consciousness, a presence that seemed to contain within itself the universe itself. Your eyes. My God, his eyes were impossible to describe. They changed color. Sometimes amber, sometimes deep blue like the ocean. It was like looking at galaxies spinning, supernovas exploding, and at the same time, the most tender look I've ever felt in my entire life. And when he looked at me, I just fell apart inside. He knew everything. Everything. Every thought. Every mistake. Every time I laughed at other people's faith. Every time I treated spirituality as nonsense. He knew. But the most shocking thing, there was no trial, none. Just love. A love so absolute, so immense, so overwhelming, Ram, that I cried. I cried like I had never cried before, not in life, not in death. And then, he spoke. But it was not a speech in the sense that we know it. It was a direct transmission to the Listen, Gregory, the time has come for you to know what has always been hidden from you. At that moment, a part of me wanted to run away. I wanted to run back to the comfort of ignorance of matter, of what I thought was the only reality. But it was too late. I was about to discover the secret that humanity had forgotten, or worse, that had been hidden from it. He drew closer. The light around him vibrated, pulsed, as if the very fabric of reality was responding to his presence. When Jesus reached out his hand toward me, my first instinct was to step back. Not out of fear, but because I felt that that simple gesture would shatter everything I believed to be true. His gaze pierced my soul. It wasn't just looking, was to see who I was, who I am, and who I could have been. No lie, no mask, no excuse survived that look. And then, your touch. He touched my forehead with his fingertips. The very second his hand touched me, it was as if the entire universe exploded. But it wasn't an explosion of destruction. It was an explosion of revelation. I saw the birth of the universe. What we call the Big Bang was not a random explosion. It was not chance. It was a decision, a conscious expression. Every atom, every law of physics, every equation of mathematics are not fruits of chaos. They are codes, divine codes. And then I realized something that made me tremble in the depths of my existence. Science has never contradicted God. It has always been his language. Gravity, DNA, universal constants, Fibonacci sequences in plants, the symmetry of galaxies. All this is signature. His signature. But the revelation didn't stop there. Suddenly, I was thrown into a vision. The scenario has changed completely. I was in a place that I recognized immediately, even though I had never been there physically. Jerusalem, 2,000 years ago. The smell of dust, sweat, and blood permeated the air. Screams, crying, and in front of me, a cross, and in it, him. But the shock wasn't seeing the scene. It was realizing that I wasn't just watching. I was inside him. I felt the nails ripping into my wrists, piercing the nerves. I felt the excruciating pain with each breath as my body heaved against the spikes in my feet to try to draw in a drop of air. But you know what was worse? It wasn't the physical pain. It was the weight of sins, of all humanity. It was as if every tear shed, every betrayal, every suffering of every human being, from the beginning of time until the end, had been poured into my chest. And yet, there was no hatred, there was no anger, there was no desire for revenge. There was only love. Love. And forgiveness. And in the midst of that suffering, I heard his voice, which was now also mine. Now you understand. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. The real secret was yet to be revealed. The crucifixion scene began to unravel. The voices, the pain, the sound of tears and screams. Everything was swallowed up by an even more intense light. I was pulled into a space I can't describe. It wasn't heaven. It wasn't earth. It was like being in the womb of the universe itself. And then, the images began. I saw moments in the life of Jesus that were never recorded, never told. Moments that were hidden. I saw him, still a child, talking to Mary, his mother, about the awareness of his true origin. I saw his look of love, but also of pain, as he realized that humanity was not ready to understand who he really was. I saw a scene that left me in shock. Jesus in his youth spending 3 days with an unknown family, not preaching religion, not talking about rules, not talking about dogmas, but teaching love, healing, compassion, and connection with the divine within each one. And then, he cured a child of leukemia. Yes, leukemia. It doesn't matter that this word didn't exist at the time, because illness, pain, and suffering are realities of existence, not of language. But what destroyed me the most was realizing that throughout his life, Jesus tried to teach something that humanity didn't want to listen. The biggest secret is that he never belonged to religions. He was never the property of a faith, a doctrine, a book. He is. He is the very fabric of the universe, the living consciousness that sustains every atom, every cell, every star. And then he showed me matter. and spirit are the same thing at different frequencies. Quantum physics and spirituality are two sides of the same code. And the shock came when I heard his voice, clear, direct, vibrating within me like a truth impossible to deny. Gregory, humanity's greatest mistake was to believe that I came to found a religion. I did not come to build walls. I came to tear them all down. What they have hidden from you is that I am. I am existence itself. I am the code that holds the universe together. I am gravity. I am light. I am love. I am consciousness. And in that moment, I understood. The conflict between science and faith never existed. It was a lie that we have been kept believing for millennia. God is not in temples. God is not in books. God is not outside. He is inside. Inside every cell. Inside every subatomic particle. Inside me. And inside you. But in that moment of revelation, a shadow began to approach. An absence, a biting cold, hell, was coming. Suddenly, the light began to fade. Not like a simple blackout, but like it was being sucked, drained, ripped out of me. The warmth of Jesus' presence disappeared. Peace, love, divine vibration disappeared. And then, the cold came. But not a physical cold. It was an existential cold. An emptiness so absolute, so overwhelming that it seemed to tear me apart from the inside out. I looked around and there was nothing. No light, no sound, no presence, only emptiness, the absolute. And then I realized I was in hell. But no, it wasn't how I imagined. There was no fire. There were no demons with tridents. There were no screams of physical pain. Hell was absence. Total absence of God, absence of love, absence of meaning. And in that place, when there were other consciences, people, souls. I didn't see faces, but I felt them. I felt despair, agony, guilt, remorse. But it wasn't remorse for common mistakes. It was remorse for having rejected the horse, for having spent a lifetime pretending that God did not exist, that love did not matter, that everything was chance, matter, ego, vanity. And it hurt. It hurt more than any physical torture you could imagine. It was an internal scream, eternal, without sound, without mouth, without end. No one was there because God punished them. They were there because they chose to be. They chose throughout their entire lives to live in separation. They denied love. They denied their own light. They denied their own essence. And when their bodies died, the universe just respected that choice. I realized with overwhelming shock that I would have gone there. If I had died before this experience, before this heart attack, that's where I would have stayed. Because I rejected. I laughed. I mocked. I treated God as a fantasy, Jesus as a myth, and spirituality as superstition. And then, in the midst of that emptiness, I heard his voice again, the voice of Jesus. It no longer came from the light, because the light was not there. It came from within me. Gregory, hell is not a punishment. It is a choice. And at that moment I understood. Hell is the absence of love, the absence of God. The greatest punishment is simply being separated from him. But at that moment, when the agony seemed unbearable, a spark of light appeared, weak, small, but alive. And I understood. The choice was still in my hands. I could want God. I could want to return to the light. And then I screamed, not with my voice, but with every particle of my being. I want to go back. I want the light. I don't want separation anymore. And the very second that desire exploded inside me, everything changed. The light returned. It swallowed me, it enveloped me, it tore me from the darkness, and then I saw the sky. The real sky. When the light enveloped me again, everything changed. The emptiness, the cold, the despair disappeared like smoke in the wind. But it wasn't just a return to the light. It was like crossing a portal into a reality so grand, so sublime that not even 1,000 words could describe it. What I saw, it was not a heaven like they told us. There were no thrones, no streets of gold, no angels with feathered wings. There was no magical city in the clouds. It was infinitely bigger. Bigger, more real, more alive, more me than I had ever been. The sky was home. It was as if every particle of my being recognized that place. As if, deep down, I always knew that this was my true home. And that life on Earth was just a temporary trip, an oblivion, a training. Everything was vibrating. The colors were indescribable. They weren't just visible, they were felt. Each color had a sound, a smell, an emotional temperature. I saw beings of light, consciousnesses that didn't need bodies, forms that vibrated in such absolute love that I could barely bear it. And the most shocking thing, they knew me. They knew who I was. They recognized me like someone who recognizes a brother who had been lost for centuries and had finally returned home. They embraced me, not with arms but with energy, with presence, with love. And in that moment I felt, I am loved in a way I never imagined possible. There was no judgment. There was no questioning, only belonging, only absolute love. And then, God. But no, not like an old man sitting on a throne like in human cartoons. God had no form. Because God is. It was everything. It was in everything. It was the field. It was the vibration. It was existence itself, pulsing, breathing, loving, conscious. When His presence enveloped me, my entire being collapsed. Not of fear, but of reverence, of overwhelming smallness in the face of such greatness, and at the same time of an indescribable certainty. I am part of Him, always have been, always will be. Every pain I felt in life, every tear I cried, every night I felt alone, lost, meaningless, and He was there. He was always there. He always felt. He always loved me. I saw that nothing is by chance, that there is no coincidence, that there is no separation. The entire universe is a dance of love, a mathematical expression of living consciousness, and at the center of it all, Jesus. He appeared again. His gaze, impossible to describe. His smile made entire galaxies vibrate. And then He said, in a voice that sounded like the very sound of the universe, "Gregory, now you understand. But there is still something you need to see." And in that moment I knew the biggest revelation was yet to come. When Jesus said there was still something I needed to see, I felt my entire being prepare, as if every particle of me knew I was about to receive the revelation of revelations. Suddenly, everything around me began to transform. That sky of light, of love, of belonging, gave way to an infinite space where there was no floor, no ceiling, no horizon. But there was codes, sequences, formulas, geometric structures, a living, pulsating network that extended beyond what my mind could conceive. It was the very code of the universe. And then I saw that every atom, every particle, every force of nature, everything was sustained by a living intelligence. Nothing was, perhaps, nothing. Gravity, light, the expansion of the universe, the symmetry of flowers, the spirals of galaxies, the sequences of human DNA. Everything is a conscious code. And then Jesus spoke with a loving firmness that reverberated to the furthest reaches of my consciousness. What you have been taught is just the surface. What they have hidden from you is that I am not a religious figure. I am the code, the very fabric of reality. My entire being trembled. I am the Word, I am the frequency that sustains existence. All that you call the laws of physics, biology, chemistry, are expressions of my consciousness. I am the way, the truth, and the life, not as a religious phrase but as universal law. And at that moment I saw that science has never contradicted God. Never. It has always been His language. But they taught us wrong. We have been made to believe that God is out there, in the heavens, somewhere far away, and that science is a human tool to understand a meaningless universe. Lie. The biggest lie in the history of humanity. God is not outside. God is. It is in matter, in energy, in the quantum field, in the space between atoms. And Jesus, He is not a historical figure. He is not the property of religions. He is the very consciousness that holds existence together. What they hide from us is that the real Jesus did not found religions. He revealed the workings of the universe itself, and this was distorted, erased, manipulated. He looked at me with a depth that tore at my soul. The biggest secret is that you are part of me. You always have been, but you forgot. And now, it's time to remember. At that moment, the network of codes, formulas, and light began to dissipate, and Jesus came closer again. His face was now clearer. His eyes seemed to contain infinity itself. And with a tone that seemed to contain sadness and love at the same time, He said, "But you can't stay. You must go back." I didn't want to. For the love of all that exists, I didn't want to, and my spirit despaired. "Please, don't send me back. Don't take me away from the light." But Jesus just smiled. "You have a mission, Gregory, and you must fulfill it." At that moment I knew that my return was inevitable, but also that nothing would ever be the same again. The smile of Jesus, my God, that smile. It was as if He said it all without needing words. A love so overwhelming, so absolute, so perfect, that anything I could have called love in earthly life seemed a pale shadow in comparison. But along with that love came a deep pain, the pain of goodbye. I didn't want to go. For the love of love itself, I didn't want to go back. I knew what was waiting for me on the other side. The pain, the limitation, the weight of the body, the forgetfulness, the doubt, the loneliness, the deafening noise of the world disconnected from the divine. Here I was complete. I was whole. I was love in its purest form. And then Jesus came, closer. His eyes, my God, His eyes seemed to contain entire galaxies, and at the same time they were filled with a compassion that I will never ever be able to explain. He put His hand on my shoulder. The touch. It wasn't physical. It was more real than any physical touch. It was a touch of essence, of my true identity. And then He said, "You must go back." My soul trembled. I tried to argue. I tried to beg. I tried to hold the light, to hold on to that love, to stay there. But the answer was a loving silence, a silence that said, "I know it hurts, but it's necessary." And then He spoke the sentence that would change my life forever. "Tell them that I am more real than their doubt, more present than their fear, and more loving than their shame." My spirit began to tremble. The light around me began to pulse differently. It was as if the sky was beginning to move away from me. And then He looked into my eyes and said, "Gregory, remember, the greatest secret, though, is that you have never been separated from me. Separation has always been an illusion." At that moment I realized that my return was not a punishment. It was a mission. I needed to tell. I needed to shout to the four corners of the earth that everything we were taught about God, about Jesus, about life, was distorted, forgotten, or hidden. Humanity did not need more religions. She needed to remember who she is, and Jesus. He is not a figure from the past. He is not a belief. He is not a myth. He is the code, the consciousness, the field that connects everything. When I realized this, I started to get pulled. It was like being sucked into a tunnel of energy. The colors, the sounds, the beings of light, everything began to dissolve. The sky was disappearing. The light was fading. And then, the pain returned. It was like falling from an invisible skyscraper. The heat of the sky turned into a brutal electric shock. Absolute love was, for a second, replaced by overwhelming physical pain. My eyes snapped open. The ceiling of the operating room, the cold lights, the smell of alcohol, blood and sweat, and voices, many voices. "He's back! My God! He's back!" someone shouted. I was on the floor, surrounded by my own medical team, the sound of the heart monitor going off. Beep, beep, beep. Life. My muscles ached as if they had been crushed. My chest felt like it had been split open with a sledgehammer. Every cell screamed in pain. "Gregory, are you listening to me?" Someone was holding my hand, trembling, eyes filled with tears. My gaze was still lost. My brain was trying to understand where I was, or rather, what dimension I was in, because a part of me was still there. When my mouth finally managed to move, only one sentence came out, without me planning it, without me understanding how. I saw Jesus. The silence was absolute. Doctors, nurses, everyone was paralyzed. Some looked at each other, others turned pale. One of the surgeons, a friend of mine for years, blurted out, "You were dead. 23 minutes. No pulse." And they were right. Clinically, I was dead. My heart stopped. My lungs wouldn't breathe. My brain, flat, with no electrical activity. 23 minutes. More than enough time, according to medicine, to never come back. And yet, I was there. But something inside me knew. I wasn't the same anymore. Gregory, the skeptic, the arrogant one, the man who laughed at the faith of others, died on that floor. What came back was a man with a mission. A mission given to me by the very consciousness that sustains the universe. By Jesus, by what has been hidden from us for millennia. In the days that followed, the tests showed the impossible. My heart was perfect, no scars, no after effects. Doctors couldn't explain it, neither could I. If it weren't for the experience I had. The world seemed different, the colors were brighter, the people seemed more precious, and at the same time, I carried a pain. The pain of human forgetfulness. The pain of knowing that billions live without knowing that they are part of something much bigger. And since that day, a single phrase echoes within me, every day. Non-stop. Tell them that I am more real than their doubt, more present than their fear, and more loving than their shame. That's why I'm here, telling you this. Because my mission is not to convince. My mission is to remind you of the truth that was hidden. Jesus is not a religion. He is the very code of reality, the very fabric of the universe, the living consciousness that holds everything together, and that has never ever been separated from us. And now you know. The secret is no longer hidden. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.